Well, good morning to Pastor Rusty at the Village and Pastor John at James River and to Pastor Mac here at Buford Road. God is good and all the time. Well, it is that time of year. I know this has happened and probably is happening and will happen if it hasn't yet. Husband and wife going out, they have a list a mile long. There's probably no way they can get it accomplished in this one shopping trip, but they're driving hard to get it done. And so they're in this store and all of a sudden she turns and her husband has disappeared. She is so mad. She gets on her cell phone. Finally, he answers, and she says, "Where are you? You know we've got a lot of stuff to do. I need you here. We need to make decisions. Where are you?" He said, "Well, honey, do you remember the jewelry store we were in last year, and you picked out that beautiful diamond necklace that I couldn't afford, but I told you one day I would be able to buy it for you?" Well, all of a sudden, she gasped and choked back and a tear began to fall down her cheek, and she said, "Yeah, I remember where that store is." He said, "I'm in the gun shop next to it if you want to find me." I can only imagine what the next part of that conversation was, but the gift for this week may help all of you for where you are because it is entitled a Yellie, Y-E-L-L-I-E-S, Yellie. Now, the beautiful thing about a Yellie is once you put in 3 magic batteries, the louder you yell, the more active it gets. Can I get a witness? It's got 6 surprise movements. And so you get to yell at it, and the louder you yell, the more it moves. So you can act like you're really kind of getting the toy going when really you're yelling at your spouse or your children or whatever. But nonetheless, I got to tell you, these also come in a set because this one is Mr. Bo Dangles, by the way. You have Fluffer Puff, Toothy Spooter, Klutzers, Peaks, and my favorite, Harry Scoots. So here you go. Here's your gift for the week. You can start yelling at each other and claim that it's all around a toy. Now you know why we're in this Advent conspiracy. We're conspiring against culture to take back Christmas. To take back Christmas from a culture that has stolen it from baby Jesus because it's fallen under the #1 religion in the world, consumerism. It has its own emblem. We have a cross. Consumerism has the $sign. It has tenets that it believes in and that it supports, that it markets, that it advertises. That if you want to be somebody, if you want to be significant, if you want to have worth, then just buy this thing and it will give you what you need. Their favorite word in the tenets of this religion known as consumerism is more. You can never have enough. You always need more. There are other tenets that go with it that talk about how they've made Jesus into the patron saint of fourth quarter earnings. It's also the belief that they can get us to buy gifts we don't need with money we don't have, sometimes for people we don't even like. But that's what consumerism does. It's best described and defined and summed up by Max Lucado. Max Lucado says, if our happiness comes from something we deposit, drive, drink, or digest, then more than likely we're following the religion of consumerism. And so we want to take it back. But we've also discovered we've got to be intentional about this. It's not something that's just going to happen. And so last week we talked about how if we're going to take Christmas back from the culture, we're going to have to learn how to worship fully in this season of Advent. We're going to have to learn how to peel back the layers in our heart. We're going to have to find a way to undress our soul before God. Because the truth of the matter is the things that we desire are the things that we worship. So it begs the question, do we desire to worship baby Jesus? Because that's what we will do if that's the case. And so during Advent, then we've got to be intentional about looking into our hearts and discovering that we're going to find Jesus not at the mall. We're not going to find him online. We're going to have to find Jesus maybe even by going back to that nasty, stinking place it all began, which was the stable. You talk about a place so far away from the consumeristic mall or online that makes everything beautiful and glitzy and glamorous and this sends this message, you'll be somebody if you can get this, if you can own this. The furthest thing from that is where we're going to meet baby Jesus. In this low-down, stinking stable that represents just how far on the margins baby Jesus was. The fact of the matter was he came not just to save the world, but the whole world. Everybody in it. So we've got to learn how to worship fully by returning to the stable because it's there that we see Mary and Joseph and the shepherds and later the wise men who come to Jesus' home. They all end up doing the same thing, worshiping. Will we? If we conspire against Advent, we can, if we will. But let's not stop there. The next part of helping us to kind of conspire against Advent in terms of the cultural Christmas and what it's done to it is this challenge for us to spend less. To spend less. Now, there's no doubt about this one truth. Christmas and this season is a season of excess, is it not? Eat, drink, be merry. Live in today. Don't worry about the bills. Spend, spend, spend. Charge, charge, charge. You'll get the bad news soon enough, and don't even worry about it. Just think about how many people you're going to make happy. Just live in excess right now. Today's challenge is to spend less. And so it begs the question, spend less than what? Spend less than who? Less than our neighbor? Less than the average American, who it was said this week will spend $1,000 at Christmas, every American? Today's challenge is for you and me to join in this kind of a struggle to define this line, this very fine line between enough and excess. Between enough and excess. Well, in order to do that, though, we've got to be willing to be honest about something and to confess most of us live in excess. Now we don't like to say that because we might even say about our wealth, we'd say, no, I'm not wealthy. Let me tell you about somebody who's wealthy. You know where they live, you know what they drive, you know what they make a year. We're never wealthy. We're always poorer than the wealthy ones. At least that's the way we describe ourselves. And yet we're all wealthy. And in many ways, we all live in excess. Let me give you an example. How many coats do you have in your closets at home? Well, I was sitting there at my office this week writing this sermon, and I thought, okay, how many coats do I have? And I started counting, and here we go. Raincoat, overcoat, multiple sport coats, suit coats, a light coat, a heavy coat, a ball game coat, a working in the yard coat. I'm actually embarrassed to tell you how many. It was 20 plus coats at home. Now, I shared that in the early service, and somebody said, that's a lot. I thought, oh, you want to comment on my excess. How many is in your closet, right? How many coats are in your closet? John the Baptist says in Scripture, Luke 3:11, anyone who has 2 shirts should share one with the one who has none. And anyone who has food should do the same. Depending on the translation, the word there is shirt or coat. But I got to thinking, I'm glad it doesn't say, it wanted me to count my shirts. How many shirts do you have? Hello, anybody home? Now, because I am the sensitive pastor I am, I will not ask ladies how many shoes you have. We'll move on. Oh, you're glad I'm not asking. I know you are. What would our spending look like in this challenge to define the line between excess and enough? What would our spending look like if we begin to balance what we needed versus what we wanted? Even if that were true for other people we were buying for, if we began to ask a serious question, what do they really need and what do they really want? This person we're buying for. What would our shopping look like if we made Christmas purchases for our children and our grandchildren, not based totally on wants, but what do they need, and balance that with their want? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves this morning. If I said to you, is it healthy to give our children or grandchildren anything they want? You would say, absolutely not, January through November. Because when we get to December, what happens? Something happens. At this time of year, we kind of fall into this, less than sober attitude. We kind of become a little bit high on consumerism. And we begin to drink in terms of excess and providing whatever it is they want. Because when Christmas comes and the magic of Santa enters in and the nostalgia of the past and our desire we want to see wonder and surprise on our kids' faces when they tear open those gifts. And the fact is we want to show our love for our children and our grandchildren. Well, we all know that can't be done with 1 gift or 2 or 3 or 4. It's got to be done with multiple gifts. Overwhelming. See what happens? And we've moved out of the sobriety of a January through November understanding it is not healthy to give our children everything they want. But there needs to be this line. And listen, I know what it feels like. I've crossed the line many, many times, my own children and others, this idea of spending. And I'm being challenged this year to look at spending less, if you will. Another question that might help us in this struggle is, when we are buying these gifts for our children and grandchildren and others, are we building their character when we give them too much? Are we growing them in the Lord when we give them everything they want? Or are we just kind of overwhelming them with this incredible number of gifts, giving ourselves permission to indulge, well, because it's Christmas. Eat, drink, and be merry. It's excess time. We'll worry about all the other come January. And let me ask you, are we feeding a cycle that distorts the truth when we do that? Are we feeding this cycle, distracting them, distracting ourselves from the real reason of this season, the birth of Jesus Christ, which we've already said we got to get back to the stable, not to the mall and not online, if we're going to begin to get in touch with this marginalized, poverty-stricken baby that came into the world to save us. It wasn't about stuff, was it? Are we defining Christmas for them something different than the reality of Jesus coming into the world in poverty and being on the edges of society, marginalized to the very edge? I am so thrilled because this Advent conspiracy is beginning to take root in our Bon Air family. We see people giving to the missions funding of the Lottie Moon Christmas offering that, though you may not see where it goes, it ends up in the hands of missionaries all over the world who are challenging this world and bringing them to Jesus Christ. Money that goes to the Baptist General Association of Virginia for missions and disaster relief to help people. You know we've had an inordinate amount of disasters this year. Our mission store, as of today, over $40,000. Would you clap for that? Would you celebrate that? That is the movement of God in an Advent conspiracy that says we're not just going to pad our pockets with stuff we want, but we're actually going to spend for those who need. You want to hear the stories? This is what's happening. We have a family who had some children who called their grandparents after they got introduced to the Hope Store concept. And they called them whatever their cherished name was, Granny and Grandpa, whatever it was, Meemaw and Pawpaw. We want you to, whatever you were going to spend on us, cut in half and spend it in the Hope Store. Did you hear that? That is the conspiracy of Advent. We have another person who purchased things from the Hope Store and is inviting her family to have a meal around the table. And with those things purchased, they're going to have a tough discussion about needs and wants, theirs and those around the world. We have a family who they came as a family and chose things off the Christmas tree, the angels off the tree, and together they shopped and they talked about what they were doing to provide for those who had a wish list. And when I say wish, I mean wishing. We've had children bring their piggy banks to the Hope Store to buy books for children on the Eastern Shore and in Ghana. You see, this is the movement of Advent conspiracy that changes our children to understand this line between excess and enough. We're conspiring against the grain. We're trying to steal back Christmas away from culture and bring it back to getting, it's more about giving what people need than getting what we want. That's what we want to teach our children, isn't it? Maybe our mantra should become spend less, except when we should spend more. Spend less, except when we should spend more on things that are not temporary but eternal, things that truly do matter and won't end up in the trash can like a Yelly or in a yard sale. I know, without asking, there are folks who have said and been saying and maybe even say before we've finished with this series, boy, the preacher sure is against buying gifts for kids and grandkids. You couldn't be further from the truth. What I want to be about this season is to find a line where I can honor God with my choices about needs versus wants and about my spending. The conviction I'm falling on under in this series is the question of how much is enough. Where is this line between enough and excess? The conviction I'm falling under is how strange it is to me that debt and consumerism reach their pinnacle on the morning that we celebrate the birth of our Savior. Have you thought about that? You think I'm kidding when I say the world has turned Jesus into the patron saint of fourth quarter earnings? How much has a cultural Christmas caused you and I to stuff our backpack? The conviction I am falling under is, what if it all burned? What if it all burned? Well, glory be to God, we're members of the Jesus family. We have a soul intact and faithful that leans into God. This is not a new concept to us as Christians in terms of spending less in order to give more. The Hebraic, the Old Testament concept says, give 10% right off the top before you pay anything else, do anything else, give 10% to God. And the New Testament comes along and blows that out of the water and says, no, you know what? It all belongs to God. You're a responsible steward for all of it, not just the 10%, the 100% in terms of what you do with it. And then along comes 2 Corinthians 9:11 where Paul says, look, you'll be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. Don't think just money. You'll be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion, and through your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. This is said another way. You will be made rich in everything. Don't think just money. You will be made rich in everything so that your generosity will spill over in every direction. Spend less, unless it's time to give more. This challenge, this is no blow-by-easy challenge. C.S. Lewis tries to describe the tension as he understands it about the power that money has over us when it comes to spending. I want to read this quote to you. He says, I do not believe one can settle how much we ought to give. I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. In other words, if our expenditures on comforts and luxuries, amusements, is up to the standard common among the same income as our own, we're probably giving away too little. If our charities, listen to this, if our charities, our giving, if it doesn't pinch or hamper us, I should say they're too small. There ought to be things we should like to do and cannot do because our giving, our charitable expenditure, excludes them. What would our giving look like if we were pinched? What would our Bon Air community, our state, our nation, our world look like if we gave more than we could, more than we could spare? What's going in your backpack? What you want or what you need? Pray with me. I fall under conviction, oh God. I fall under the conviction of knowing I've crossed this line so many times in my life, of living out of excess and choosing to give more out of, disparaging amounts, less than what I can, less than what I could, less than what I should. Father, forgive me. Come quickly and challenge all of us, Lord, in this season of Advent to make a difference like we never have before. Challenge us to spend less and find ways to give more. It'll be for your glory and your honor that we do so. If there's someone, Lord, who's listening even now who you're calling them in the depths of their heart to come give their life to you, I pray they would come and say, I love you, Jesus. I want to live for you, not for this culture of consumerism. I want to live for you. I want to come to the stable and worship. I want to find a way to spend. I want to find that line between excess and enough so that I can meet you and worship you. Bless us in any and every decision that's made, oh God. It's for your honor and for your glory. Amen.